What's up, everybody? If you are new here, be sure to go down below, hit the subscribe button, be sure to like this video, share it on any social media platform. First and foremost, holy shit, I was just not expecting or ready for this. We typically don't get midseason trades due to how hard capping the hard cap is in the WNBA. Marina Mabrey is now with the Connecticut Sun. Morriah, Jefferson, and Rachel Banham have been traded from the Sun over to the Sky. The Sky are also getting the rights to pick swap first in 2026. There's more detail on that I'll go into in a minute. And they're also getting Connecticut's 2025 first. There's a lot to dive into with this. Again, first and foremost, just like, whoa, I was not ready for this. I was not thinking that we were going to get a trade today. You can still see it. My eyes are dilated like crazy because I was at the eye doctor today, squinting like a mofo all day. So when I saw this trade pop up, Andy Costabile was first to push it about an hour and a half before it happened, and now it's here. So I want to start off talking about Marina Mabrey to the Sun because I love this for Connecticut. This team wants to be a title contender. Like, that is clear cut. I think that they have the tools to get to the WNBA finals again. They've shown we are a deep playoff team. But it's been clear cut again as well this year. They have struggled against the top of the top. They lost yesterday to a Liberty team that was missing Brianna Stewart and Benigel Hamilton. They've struggled with the Liberty. I think they've lost 10 of their last 11 games to the Liberty over the last couple seasons. They struggled with the Aces earlier on this year. They have the tools to make things shake, but they needed a change. Why? The spacing. I think that they do a lot of great things within the flow of their offense, but after a record start to the year as a franchise, things have stagnated. They are 10th in the WNBA in three-point attempts and three-point makes. They're 9th in three-point percentage, shooting just about 31.5%. That has killed them to close games. But along with, there's a myriad of things, like slow starts in some quarters have been an issue as well, but they needed to find a way to up their ability to space and play in the half court, because when they're not able to win off of the strength of their defense and forcing turnovers and just generating extra possessions on the glass, they can struggle. And adding Marina does quite a ton for that. I think you can look at Marina Mabrey's box score this year and not be overly blown away. Like, obviously the points are there, rebounds, assists, but like, she hasn't been crazy efficient. I think a lot of that has to do with the confines of Chicago's offense. She's had a lot of the offenses had to funnel to her, to close possessions. She definitely, there are moments where she could take other shots. But I think, again, part of that, too, is Chicago is one of the few teams that is shooting less and worse than the Connecticut Sun. And I think that plays a big part in what, when you look at what Marina's efficiency is this year. But I think when you talk about what she can do as a player, I mean, she's just exceptional off the ball. She's one of the better off-screen players in the league. Can come off, shoot threes off movement. She can set screens herself, so she can be involved in like Spain pick and roll. She can go screen. She can do a ton of things that the guards on Connecticut's roster aren't super comfortable doing, if we're being honest. Like, there are great slashing guards on Connecticut's roster. Ty Harris has gotten really good as a pick and roll operator, but they really don't have movement shooting like that. So I think Marina adds an element that they just don't have, and they haven't had the last couple seasons other than Beck Allen last year. So I love that for the Sun. Marina's somebody who can get her shot off the dribble comfortably. She's shooting around 30% on pull-up threes this year, which is an elite number, but she can get to it, and defenses guard her. That's extremely important. I think, again, when you look at Connecticut as a whole, they have some players who don't get guarded in the half court. So having shooters and ball handlers who can draw the attention of that defense is crucial, and she shoots about 37% on wide open threes. So again, if you get left open, you got to make the defense pay. Marina's going to do that. I love that. She can post up smaller guards. She can take bigs off the dribble. She's really good operating in the mid-range, which, again, like, Ty Harris can play in the mid-range too. They have you add another threat to that on top of that. I would also point out too, something I talked about with Shimmy Gray Miller on our most improved pod. She's gotten so much better defensively this year. I still wouldn't call Marina a great defender, but she's gone from being one of the worst perimeter defenders in the league to somebody who has competed to be around average this year. And I think that means a ton. Like, can she hang up playing on point guards and the smallest guards? No. She doesn't have the foot speed for that, but she's somebody who can hang on wings. She can guard up a little bit, and she's going to fight. And that is a lot more than we've seen in prior years, and I think with what she brings offensively, that's huge. So when I think about this, with relation to the Sun, I think we're going to see the most efficient version of Marina Mabrey, in my opinion, because I would anticipate that she's not going to be as on ball. I think she, as we've seen with everybody coming to the Sun, with their read and react offense, with how things play, with Alyssa Thomas more as their point guard, it's going to be a lot of, okay, you're cutting, you're moving off the ball, you're doing things that get you open looks and create easy looks in the flow of an offense. And when you have a player who can score at all three levels like Marina can, that opens things up. I think this is going to take an adjustment period. They have a tough schedule right out the gate from the Olympic break. But again, for a team where we saw the highest highs for the first month and a half of the season, and then some of the stagnancy and lows, I think this is a must for this team. And we'll get into more of that when we get into overarching reactions at the end. But I like this quite a bit for the Sun. Rachel Banham had really not been able to find playing time for them. Obviously, she just went off and had a crazy game against Phoenix. Morriah Jefferson, unfortunately, just has never gotten right injury-wise. Her ankle has been bothering her pretty much the entire year, unfortunately. I'm hopeful that she can get right and get out there and get some playing time. She's been a productive player when she can be healthy. We just haven't gotten to see that this year. And I think, again, this was another thing where Connecticut's like, hey, we need to make something happen for this year. We cannot wait around. And again, I think, figuring out how they balance, like, okay, is Marina the starter? Do we keep Ty Harris in the starting lineup? Veronica Burton has played really well. I think, again, you just give yourself another option. Stephanie White and the staff has shown they're incredibly adaptable. They are willing to try different things. They're going to throw out different lineups. This just gives them a real option and somebody who can definitely close games, who can start games, who can be a factor in all facets, and they need that. So I like this for them. Let's talk about this from Chicago's perspective, just on the player side. I am going to be so fascinated to see what this looks like. I think, I was just thinking today about, they had their best win of the season last night, in my opinion, beating the Las Vegas Aces in Las Vegas. Kennedy Carter was phenomenal. Marina Mabrey had a really good game as well. You look at where this team is at right now. They are 12th in the WNBA in three-point attempts. They're 12th in the WNBA in three-point makes. And they're 8th in three-point percentage. And I think three-point percentage isn't always everything. But again, it's like there just isn't a ton of shooting on this team. And then you zoom back out. Okay, they've made 109 threes as a team this season. Which, again, that's dead last in the league. Marina Mabrey made 56 of those. The only other player on the Chicago Sky who has made more than 10 threes this season is Dana Evans. So I look at this right away, and there's a lot of, again, overarching future stuff that we can and will talk about that matters for this group and their context. I think right off the bat, when you talk about a team that has already had some issues in terms of, if they lose a lead or if the shots stop falling from deep, sometimes they've had games where they're able to get really hot, play out in transition, make things happen off rebounding in the flow of, just playing out of transition. As soon as a team starts making shots, they lose, they lose the ability to compete and maintain that. I think this team has shown a lot of really great things. I don't want to take away from that, but I think with where the league is at and where it's headed, and especially with how this roster is built, with some guards who are very good getting to the rim, slashing, getting in the mid-range, and two post players who have a wealth of potential, you need three-point shooting around that. And yes, you add Rachel Banham, but I think my biggest question is going to be, how big of a factor is she? Like, how much can you fit in what she does? Again, she just went off and set, I believe, the WNBA record for three-point makes off the bench in a game with 8. Was 8 of 11 against the Mercury, had 24 points, was her best game with the Sun that she'd played. And I think she's a player who, in my opinion, she's more than just a shooter. She can do a little bit with the ball in her hands. And what she does as a shooter, too, it's not just catch and shoot. Like, she can screen, she can come off movement. Part of why I think she struggled to find traction in Connecticut, she had that concussion early on, and it just never felt like she was able to get stable minutes and figure things out from there. But I do have a little bit of worry because, to me, Rachel was a player who very much the Sun needed. Like, the Sun needed Rachel Banham to hit and work, which is why they make this trade, because they didn't feel that it was working. They didn't feel that they necessarily had her as a stable rotation player. How is that going to be different in Chicago is kind of what I'm wondering. And I don't mean that as, a slight, like, I think Rachel is a very good basketball player who can do a lot of things, and I think she could become, a player who is really capable of spacing the floor for this group. But again, I think, what else do you bring to the table that keeps you on the court? This team has been very defense first. And I've loved that. I've loved watching them in that. Every player has played defense for the Chicago Sky this year. But again, I think Rachel's a player who's going to work to do her job defensively. But I would probably say right now that Marina Mabrey is a better defender than Rachel Banham, as the season has gone, at least in my opinion. So again, like, she's not the same level of playmaker. She's not going to get into the teeth of the defense like Marina does. So again, like, what kind of things are you bringing that, maybe a teaspoon and her staff are going to be most comfortable with getting out of a rotation? So I'm going to be fascinated to see that, because that will color my projection of this trade, because I do think, well, there is a lot to talk about again with the future. I think with where this group is at right now and having those two young posts in Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso, you need to have players on the floor who are going to facilitate their growth. And I think if you do not have players who can shoot, who can, keep the ball flowing and moving, like, then I do think you're doing a little bit of a disservice to those posts in terms of their development. Like, you need to have you need to have actual balance in your floor spacing for them to have cleaner looks, cleaner reads, just everything. I think that's really important. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with Mo Jefferson here. Again, the ankle has continued to really bother her this season, unfortunately, after having a very good season in Phoenix last year and a very good one in Minnesota the year before. I think it's interesting because Lindsay Allen has taken over the starter, and she and Kennedy Carter have been phenomenal together. I would not want to see that change, and I don't think that this move indicates that. But I'm very curious to see what this looks like minutes wise for Mo Jefferson when if and when she gets healthy. How does that kind of work out? I think she's a steady ball handler. She can make some catch and shoots. She's going to compete defensively, even if she's a little bit smaller. I think there's a role where she could fit in as a backup point guard on this team, but largely it's mainly just, okay, I think this is more about, like, you're taking on those salaries. And that is probably my biggest question for the Sky here. Actually, we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to talk about the picks really quick, and then I'm going to come back to the overarching things for both teams. So for the picks, Connecticut sent their 2025 first to Chicago, which I think, to me, one of the things I struggle with in trades is, in general, I think whenever people see a trade, they see a team that got more picks and, like, that team won. And I just, especially in the WNBA, I don't think it works like that. I think there's potential that it could, but in this is year 4 of me covering the league, it just doesn't work like that, in my opinion. I think so much of it's going to be about fit and dependence. But again, so Connecticut's 2025 first to Chicago. So right now that would be the 11th pick in the 2025 draft, potentially the 12th, depending on where Golden State slots in. We still don't have clarity on where the Valkyries will end up picking. So that's going to be, again, interesting to track. I think at worst, or I guess at best for Chicago, this could wind up like the 8th or 9th pick in the draft. It could end up the 12th pick still if Connecticut really pieces things together again as the season goes on, and maybe the Liberty slide a little bit. Like, there's a lot. The point being, there's a lot that can still happen. There's no way in hell that this is going to be a lottery pick, which is fine. Everything doesn't have to be a lottery pick to be successful. Like, Angel Reese was the 7th pick overall, and she's been pretty darn good. But point being, this isn't going to be a lottery pick. I think it could still be solid, but just worth noting. They also have a 2026 first swap in place with Connecticut. So Richard Cohen over at Hoop Stats added really great insight to this. The pick swap that was done between Phoenix and Chicago during the Kalia Copper trade, it's going to be Phoenix and Connecticut that have the pick swap. So it's like Chicago has the opportunity to pick between Phoenix's pick and Connecticut. I believe that is going to be how it works out. I'm going to be interested to see more from that. Follow Richard for all little silver linings and nuances like that, because I think that's stuff that I'm just not as in tune with. He always is worth keeping up with. And then the 2025 second from the Sky is going over to the Sun this year. And I do think, like, this is a deep draft. I think that second could end up being a pretty solid player. It's not going to end up being the same as a player who goes in the first, most likely, but that's just kind of pointing out where the picks are at. What's also worth noting in this, the Dallas Wings hold a pick swap from the Marina Mabrey trade with the Chicago Sky. So if the Sky were to, let's say, they go on a massive losing streak after this, they fall into the lottery, Dallas can take their pick if they would like, because they have the right to swap right now. Dallas is currently, I believe, if I go on Tankathon right now, they were 4th earlier. Yes, so they're currently, Dallas is in 4th by current lottery projections. The Sky are in 5th, but comfortably ahead of where Dallas is at, because they're 11-14. Dallas is 5-19. So again, to me, like, you don't want this to be a situation where you lose a bunch of games, and like, you want this to just be as organic. I think as organic as possible. With the way things have worked this year, I just want to see this guy keep being competitive and growing through that competition, because they have. I mean, they're 6-6 in their last 12. The starting lineup changes have really been beneficial for them and kind of finding some new stuff. I want to see more of that. But let's look at this overarching again, because now that we have that slated out, there are some bigger things that, again, I have questions on. With Chicago, I think, kind of piggybacking off of talking about Rachel Banham and Morriah Jefferson, it's like, what does this open up? I think maybe this opens up more minutes for Michaela Onyenwere, a player who I've spoken quite a bit about this year. I think she's too good to just be riding the bench. I think when she plays, she's productive. She had really good minutes early on in the year. She's not, again, like a perfect, quote-unquote, variant of what you want for the Sky. Like, I think if in the perfect world, I think the Sky have like a Rebecca Allen type player, or somebody who can just be like a two-way player that can really shoot the basketball. They need that alongside what they have. But Michaela Onyenwere can defend multiple positions. She can really guard up. She's just smart. She makes the right reads. She makes the right plays. She will shoot the basketball. She's been solid shooting it. She can get to, a 1 to 2 dribble pull up. She can get to the rim. She can post up a little bit. Like, she's just a versatile basketball player that does good things. I think she's more of a 4 than a 3 personally, but I think with how this team is constructed in this season, like, play her at the 3 by all means. Like, I just think she needs to be playing 20 minutes a game. Like, I think she's that level of player, and I would like to see that happen. Maybe we end up seeing more of Izzy Harrison playing the 4. It's just in a weird place because this team has so many players. Even with Marina going on, now you bring in 2 other players. Like, that's a lot. How do you kind of balance that? Because I would say this is maybe deepest team in the league is a long way to put it, but like, they have the most players who are capable of playing 10 plus minutes a night. That's a lot easier to balance in your head than it is as an actual coach. So I don't envy that for sure. Next part for that is talking about the cap, because I think this is a really interesting point in looking at the way that these, again, teams are built and the cap construct. So Morriah Jefferson and Rachel Banham are both on protected veteran contracts through 2025. So what that means is they cannot be waived without having to pay them. So, like, first of all, I mean, I'm happy they have their money. They're basketball players. I want to see them get paid. But that puts Chicago in like a little bit of an odd bind, in my opinion. Obviously, like, I get the idea of like, okay, I will say, I don't agree with the idea that you, quote unquote, had to get off of Marina Mabrey's contract. I think Marina Mabrey's contract was fine. She's a good basketball player. She's been probably the second best player for the Sky this season. People might disagree with me on that. That's okay. I think it was Angel as the top player on the team for most of the season. It's Ben Kennedy the last couple weeks, but I think Marina's been second, third there pretty much the entire year. She's been really good for them. She's been very important. Again, you have to pay people. Like, to pay good players, you have to pay them. Marina was not going to get less from somewhere else. I think she would have gotten that amount of money in other situations. It's not a contract you, quote unquote, need to get off. By definition, I mean, Morriah Jefferson's making about $145,000 this year and next year, which is only $50,000 less than Marina. It's not, comparing apples to oranges, but like, just for reference, like, if you're paying a good starter, you're going to pay them close to the max. That's how it goes. So, yeah, I'm just interested by this because to me, I mean, point blank, the Sky lose a little bit of flexibility by taking on these players. Like I laid out earlier, I think that there's a world where they both make an impact and both help. The only players other than them who are going to be on contract next year, as of right now, so obviously that can change in the offseason, but right now, Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso are the only 2 other players who are out past 2024 on deals with the Sky right now. So I think that's part of where it's interesting, because now you go from, all right, well, Marina was going to be the only other player who was, past 2024 on this team, on paper right now, to now, okay, you add 2 players and I think that's, if you add their money together, it's about an extra $40,000. It's $30,000 to $40,000. It's not like insane, but it could be consequential in the future. So it is just worth noting, like, maybe that does hinder some of their flexibility. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe, maybe they just view it as worth it for quote unquote recooling assets, because that's what you come back to. This team was gutted by the Marina Mabrey trade. And I don't mean that in terms of like it was bad for competition. I think you can look at this and try and understand where James Wade came from in making that move. And to be frank, I think that was a lot more about ownership than, James Wade just wanting to quote unquote be all in on this one version of the team. They wanted to try and keep Kalia Copper around. Obviously, that didn't end up working out. We don't have to relitigate this every time something happens, but I just think that's worth noting. So now they have picks again. There are picks back in the cupboard. I think that's good. They have an opportunity to really strike. I've liked what they've done in the draft so far. Obviously, I think getting Camilla and Angel where they did was about right. Like, that's what you expect. That's kind of like what the expectation was, Like, I think that was, with that draft, it was like, all right, come in, get these picks, make it happen. I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens in 2025. This 2025 class is better than 2024 in depth, with similar top-end talent, if not better top-end talent, in my opinion. Like, I think, obviously, Caitlin is an incredible player, but I think Paige Beckers, Kiki Uriaf, and Dominique Malonga, like, there is going to be phenomenal top-end talent in this draft class, all the way through the lottery, all the way through the first. I think there are players in the second who, again, could be very good. There's going to be a lot of international players that might end up going later that could be worthwhile having as kind of draft and stash players. Like, there's a lot to think about with that. It also bears pointing out with the potential CBA change, but I shouldn't even say potential, like that opt-out is going to happen. The CBA is going to change. But no players are going to sign more than a one-year deal this coming offseason. I will be shocked if we see players sign more than a one-year deal, past 2025. So in this coming 2025 offseason, we're just not going to see players take more than 1 year. Because with the CBA change that will happen, especially with all the news coming out about the media rights deal from The Athletic today and some background reporting around that as well, the money is going to change so much that nobody is going to take a multi-year deal before a new CBA kicks in. With the opt-in, the opt-out is this November. That's going to happen. I'll be shocked if it doesn't. So I just want to keep pointing out, like, it's just a very interesting time for kind of figuring out what team building is right now. I think for teams that are in the spot where Chicago is, where Los Angeles is, where Washington is, like, you really have to hit home runs on who you are picking and who you are developing, because there's a chance to really be pretty special out of these next couple of years and this past year that's been this current year that's going on right now. If you really nail those draft picks and you have players who are under team control for 3 to 4 years and can hit the ground running, if you can do something right and you bring in 1 or 2 really good free agents and then you're able to build around that, that changes that's how great teams get built. You have to do something through the draft more often than not. Like, I think about what the Aces did. You're able to bring in Chelsea Gray and build off that. Like, after, it's always easy to point out that they had the 3 number 1 picks, but you have to build to something in order to attract those players who want to come there. So again, that's going to be fascinating to follow along with, because there's just a lot of uncertainty with the potential CBA change coming up. I do just want to say with this for Connecticut, because again, I'm not meaning this just in terms of I think everything should just be about winning right now, but like, I think we tend to skew this team got picks so they won the trade. And I think, to me, like, if I'm being honest, I feel very split on this trade, which is, I think, about where we should be. Like, I think this could end up working really well for Connecticut, even if I don't know everything. I don't know if, just point being, like, I don't know everything. But from a pure basketball standpoint, I would probably not have moved Marina. But I do think there's a chance where you take this, you have, maybe things really work right in the draft for you. And maybe, this opens up the minutes for Michaela to become somebody that she wouldn't have if Marina was still there and, those minutes aren't open. Like, there's room for that to really shift perspective. I don't think we have to have, like, a hard, concrete rule on what a trade is or isn't right when it happens. But point being, I think that this is, again, for Connecticut, this is about, like, this is their year. And I really want to hammer that home. Like, next year, they have 3 players who are past 2024 on the cap sheet right now. That's Olivia Nelson-Ododa, now Marina Mabrey, and Ty Harris. And Dejanay Carrington will be a restricted free agent, so of course they can bring her back. Obviously going to depend on what happens there. I would anticipate that she comes back, but we'll see what happens. But again, Alyssa Thomas will be an unrestricted free agent. Brianna Jones, unrestricted free agent. DeWanna Bonner, unrestricted free agent. Like, this feels like the last go-around for the Sun, and they needed to make a move happen. They felt they needed to make a move happen. They're 18-6 headed into this trade, but it was very clear, like, we need something to help get us over the hump. Like, let's strike and see what we can do. And I think, to me, this is about 2024. Like, how do we make ourselves the best team we can possibly be in 2024? And I think, as far as moves that could have been available around the league, this is probably the very best move that you can do. I don't think they did anything in a quote-unquote overpay. I think when you also factor in, like, hey, if we don't have these players back next year and we have to go into a youth move and kind of rebuild, like, hey, we have some more flexibility with, Morriah and Rachel off the books from next year, because, again, protected veteran contracts that either you trade or you are paying those. So again, it adds some flexibility. Obviously, you don't love losing picks, but I think getting a second rounder here that'll probably be near the top. That's not bad. When you think, again, like, this team doesn't really need the 11th overall pick next year when what they're trying to do is win right now. And again, if they end up losing in the second round or something, then we can look at it a little bit differently. And let's say if most of the team leaves in free agency and they end up not having that pick, then again, yeah, we feel differently, but there's still room for so much else to happen. I'm just going to keep coming back to, I feel very much split on this. I think that this gives the Sun optionality and some versatility that they really didn't have and that they needed. This gives the Sky potential to keep making moves in the future and keep building on the youth base that they have right now, and we'll see what happens with the players that they brought in. So from there, I want to flex to some of the questions that you guys sent. I appreciate everyone who sent in questions. It always means a ton. First question from Drew Sanders, at It's Drew Sanders on Twitter. First off, appreciate you as always, my guy. Who won the deal in your eyes? Looks like an overall pretty balanced deal to me. Curious what you think. Also, how much do you think this helps Connecticut's immediate title hopes? I think, again, like I just mentioned, I think it's pretty balanced, but I also would add that this does help Connecticut's immediate title hopes quite a bit. Again, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Do they really slot Marina in more as like being kind of that off-ball 2-guard and more of a wing scorer than somebody who's bringing the ball up more? I think that would be ideal. I would really like to see her slotted more in like that. I think she's done a lot of that with the Sky this year. So that's what I'm interested by. Appreciate your question, man. From Steve Alexander, at Perfect Death on Twitter. Marina off the bench, question mark. I don't know. I'm going to be so interested to see what they do with that. To me, I'm probably more interested in the closing lineups than the opening lineups. But then again, I don't know. I'm really interested about the opening lineups as well, because first quarters have been a problem. Last week, I believe, the Sun were 8th in first quarter net rating, which for a team as good as they are, that is pretty paltry. They've really struggled with slow starts offensively. So I think maybe you do look to move Marina into that starting lineup. I don't know who you end up moving around. I'm going to be fascinated by this. It's a good question. From Lucas Kaplan, at Lucas Kaplan _ does great work over covering the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Liberty. Strong recommend following him. Am I right to raise my eyebrows at the 26 swap? Is Chicago betting on Connecticut's contending window ending right around there, given AT's free agency? Yes. I think that's where I am at as well. Again, TBD, anything could happen, but I think that is absolutely in the cards and part of what makes it interesting to look at for sure. From Todd Roman, at TBRBUA, do the Sky have to cut someone now? And the Suns roster is at 10 now, so who else might they bring in? I believe the Sky do not have to cut anybody. I could be wrong on that. I'm not under the impression that they have to. They were at 12. You can technically carry 12, but most teams just don't. So we'll see what they do. but I because like obviously like they're not waiving Rachel Banham or Morriah Jefferson as I laid out. Like they can't do that. I don't know who they would even waive in this situation. So we will see what happens. Suns roster is at 10 now, so who else might they bring in? That's also a good question. I wonder if maybe they kind of look to see, just feel things out during the Olympic break. Maybe they wait until. Actually, when is the signing period? When do you have to have it finalized? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do like. I think that they will look to bring in an 11th player. I would imagine. Maybe they try and bring in another wing who can shoot. That makes sense to me, but that's just not a very easy player archetype to find because the good wing shooters are on teams already. So we will see. From Michael E. Scholler at E_Scholler. Am I wrong to assume Mabrey goes back to her more natural position at shooting guard and the Sun look for more perimeter offense to open up the floor? ... Finally, I think that's what happens. I think that's the idea here. Obviously, like Marina is a player who can really isolate and play in that in-between game. So how do you kind of balance that? Especially with bench lineups. I think that's what's going to be fascinating. Like, do they let Marina play more kind of at the one in bench lineups? Or maybe it's like her and Ty shifting between that. That'll be interesting to see. But I think you're in the right idea of that. Like I think similarly to what me and Taka Kauri talked about, earlier today, with Kelsey Mitchell, I think that's the idea with Marina Mabrey. Like we have an established point guard, or not even like an established point guard. I think so much of Connecticut is like quick decisions, making the right reads and passes. But that's the point. Like you don't want the ball to stick. So I think that will be a growth period and something for this team to figure out. With Marina on the team as well now. Next question from Nathan at curious_Colt. I am curious what this means for the Sky this offseason. Basically have a chance to fully reset the roster now. So it's interesting because kind of like I alluded to earlier, they do and they don't because now you bring in these two guaranteed contracts after trading one out. It's going to be interesting to see what does or doesn't happen with that, but it to me that does hinder their flexibility a little bit. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. From Tomas at deaddata_, it's a good username. Is there another move to be made with all the assets the Sky just accumulated and still have to potentially move? I would say yes, but not right now. Annie Costable from over at Chicago Sun-Times reported as well that the Sky have been shopping Dana Evans. I'll be interested to see if something does or doesn't happen with that. But like point blank, having a midseason trade is like a rarity in the W. We don't typically have that because of how hard capped the league is. I believe actually that this is like the only significant midseason trade that has happened since I started covering the league in 2021. So, yeah, for reference, like I would be pretty surprised if we have like another move happen right here. From Leodwin Seabury Jr. at Leodwin Jr. How does this move make sense for the Sky as they're trying to make a playoff push? I think kind of as alluded to earlier, like maybe this opens up minutes for Michaela Onyenwere. Maybe we see Breezy Turner more, who hasn't played as much this season but is capable of playing. Maybe we see Izzy Harrison play more, down at the 4. That will be curious. That kind of goes along with Moan at MoanWill23, who's getting Mabrey's minutes on the Sky. I think Michaela Onyenwere, maybe Diamond Shields is back in the rotation. Diamond has kind of struggled quite a bit offensively this year. I think she's been really good at defensively when she's been in, but the shot hasn't fully been there. She struggled a little bit with inefficiency, and she's just been banged up again, unfortunately. But I think those are the two names I would go to right away. So I don't know if it necessarily. Personally, I would say that losing Marina hurts them in the aggregate right now. For right now and the rest of the season. Like I think, it's definitely possible that we get this conglomeration of the players traded in and some uplifting from the bench that maybe changes things up and maybe they're able to find a different groove. But I personally think it's going to be hard for them to maintain this level without having a player of Marina's caliber. So I'll be interested to see what happens with that. Last question. Who gets the guard minutes? So it's a similar question, but from C at TakeHaver5. Who gets the guard minutes in Chicago? Does the Shields get a shot playing next to Carter, or do they look elsewhere? I think it will be Diamond Shields, now that I think on it more. Like I think she's too good of a player to not get, a certain amount of minutes. she just really hasn't been playing that much lately, and I think that we will probably see her get more of those minutes. But my assumption with how well they've played is that Lindsey Allen and Kennedy Carter are starters in stone, essentially, and they should be with how well they've played together. So I'm going to be fascinated to see how that keeps playing out. But yeah, I mean, that closes it up for questions. That's, majority of open, immediate thoughts I have right now. To everyone listening, I appreciate you listening and watching. Again, if you haven't already, be sure to go hit that subscribe button down below. That really helps me. We're just about to 1,200 on here. I'd like to hit 1,500 by the end of July. 1,500 subscribers, I should say. Have a lot more pods coming up. Have some videos planned and prepped. This one was not planned and prepped. I decided to do it just kind of on a whim because got to. But yeah, appreciate everyone for the support, everyone who's been following along, everyone who keeps up with my work. It's been a long month, but again, it's always appreciated. To everyone listening and watching, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.